So we have to be particularly harsh, and so we have to dominate Afghanistan. How do we do this? There are several dams in Afghanistan which are controlled by the NATO forces. They could blow them up or control the water supply to prevent farmers growing poppy directly. In the areas where we could offer other alternative crops such as mint or tea or other cash crops, then they would receive water, whereas the places where poppy is being grown would be, which is a heavily is a thirsty crop. We would deny water to those areas and irrigation to those areas. We would eradicate the population there, not by killing them, but by moving them to fortified encampments and areas which would be dominated by NATO troops. At present, NATO troops are having to dominate the entire space of Afghanistan, and they can't do it because it's a mountainous region. Controlling the civilian population and perhaps eventually building fortified towns and then chartered cities in Afghanistan would solve a critical issue about infrastructure and getting people to live in a more modern way of life, which would allow economic development in Afghanistan. If you take away the opium crop, which is worth billions and billions of pounds, Afghanistan is a net importer of aid and economic resources from the West. So after 10 years, we've basically made Afghanistan dependent on Western aid. That's a good thing, but it's not being used as a weapon. It's simply being given. And the infrastructure projects, which the Americans know Taliban fighters are working on, and the Americans are paying the Taliban not to attack, is counterproductive. You know, the Romans would have gone into those villages where they knew the Taliban were and took the people hostage, or killed everyone in the village. That's what they would have done. Now, under the rules of modern warfare, we're perhaps not allowed to do that. But they, by basically just preventing the animal trails and the road systems and various different communications links that the Taliban is still reliant on. And although they are a light infantry force for the most part, they're as well paid or even better paid than British soldiers. And the Saudis and Bin Ladens have an almost unlimited supply of weapons and money to provide the Taliban and the Haqqani network and the ISI. Because flows of arms and supplies are coming from Pakistan directly. And Pakistan is one of the largest buyers of weapons from China. So indirectly, China is affecting not supplying the Taliban, but affecting the situation now by continuing to supply arms. Whereas Russia has gone more over to allowing the West to go through its territory or its satellite region, its satellite nations of the Eurasian Union to supply NATO forces there. But just as Karachi is under the control of the United States, so to some extent, the Chinese are building a port at Gawada in the west of Pakistan's coastal region, and so we're not completely under able to control the whole space that is the the Pakistani Afghan region, you know. Um, as I said, the key point that the Romans would use is not to try and fight the enemy directly. They would buy up commodities or destroy commodities, destroy the crops and everything to make the people that they were fighting starve. Because while a man can maybe escape a bullet or a bayonet, he can't, or even or a JDAM missile, even they can't escape their own hunger, their own thirst. And I believe a more ruthless strategy in the final few years left to us to see if before withdrawal in 2014 would have provided much better results. We've underestimated how different the mindset of the Afghans is. And whilst issues such as the Israeli-Palestinian situation might be important to the Bin Ladens, or they might use that as an excuse, the actual fighters on the ground, whilst they are much more Islamic than we would find palatable to understand, they are more obsessed about the parochial communal conflicts in Afghanistan. The Afghan society is based on warlords and fiefdoms and feudalism to a much even greater extent than even maybe Arabia is, as the Arab Spring has shown. When one Taliban fighter in 2001 was asked what would solve the problem, and he was asked about the Palestinian and Israeli conflicts, he said, "Who are the Palestinians and the Israelis?" So it's not about that for the fighters of the Taliban on the ground. Many of them are mercenaries who defected to the Taliban and defect back, and it's those people who are probably the fuel of the war, because they cannot be reasoned with. Their only reasoning is the ability of a paymaster to buy their services for war fighting. But because of this, they're not as effective a force as perhaps the Taliban or Al Qaeda itself is. Al Qaeda is more the intelligentsia, the intelligence gathering organisation. AQ Khan network is similar for the ISI. And the Taliban and the Al Qaeda don't necessarily agree on every issue, and nor do the Taliban in Pakistan agree with the Afghan Taliban, and we should try and divide those people as much as possible. And there has been talk about a power struggle within Al Qaeda itself. The Romans would attempt to buy people or bring others over to their side through corrupting the enemy with various methods, threats and promises. And I'm sure a lot of that is going on. But for me, the most interesting part of Roman warfare, and its applicableness to the Afghan situation, is their understanding of economics and communications. Although the economics was roughly understood back at the time, but as economics has developed more, we can use economic methods, which can't be seen, but can be felt by the enemy, to wither them from without and from within, and cause their collapse. And that's why I've done so many videos on this subject. Thank you for listening.